Hello, ladies and gents. Dark Humility here. You can always catch me at twitch.tv/Dark Humility for typically 6 to 7 days a week of Diablo action. Of course, now expanding the realm of Diablo 4. Was I taken in? Was I corrupted by Diablo 4 or not? Here, I know, albeit a bit late, I will impart upon you my long awaited thoughts after playing the Diablo 4 beta for about 35 hours. I played a ton of rogue, a ton of sorceress, many specs. Didn't touch the barbarian, so I take some other people's words on some things regarding the barbarian, but that's about it. Here I'll give pros, cons, and just general thoughts. I even have a neutral category, some things that I'm not really sure good or bad, but just observations regarding the game. For those that do not know who I am a Diablo 2 professional of sorts. I mostly play hardcore. I've gotten tons of characters to level 99. I have found every item in the game. Completed Holy Grail, done softcore, hardcore. I make builds. I write guides for Maxroll.gg, the premier site for ARPG guides as well. So, and of course, we get paid doing it. Hence the pro. Yeah, sorta. Yes. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, long introduction, long-winded as I tend to be. Let's get into it. Let's talk Diablo 4. So what I got here in front of me is a sheet. I like sheets. I prefer them. Word documents, Excel. I do it all, Microsoft Office on Google. That's my forte. As you can see here, we have a decent amount of material I can cover. I'll try to recover it as quickly as possible. I like pretty thorough overviews to give you guys a lot of thoughts. Can always boil it down to maybe a few things, but like to, for anyone that's actually seriously considering buying this, like to give you guys a pretty thorough idea of what you may or may not be getting into. Anyway, let's start with a disclaimer though. These thoughts were generated after the end of early access beta weekend. About 35 hours of gameplay for me. They are independently formed before ever reviewing other people's beta thoughts. That is all true. I did not watch other people's reaction videos to D4. I just played through the whole thing and came up with these thoughts. After I came up with these thoughts, I actually started to look at what other people were saying, and there's definitely a lot of overlap. So these may be things that people have already said. There might be some other thoughts I have here that are nothing really I ever heard said as well. I don't know. I just think a lot about what I do, what I play. That's just who I am. Get it done. We always get it done in here. And always know that I'll put all my effort in trying to give you guys the most thorough analysis of everything that is what I believe to be accurate. Anyway, it's important to understand that these thoughts are inconclusive, as the beta did not allow for the experience of several in-game systems, including but not limited to Paragon progression, in-game item progression, in-game power progression, in general, mount trial passes, unique items, and PvP, and not limited to. So all the end-game stuff, basically. So this is something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I was streaming this, of course. And my community might be slightly smaller, 150 to 200 average viewers while I was playing this typically. I have a little bit of a pet peeve with this where people are like, what is your final verdict on Diablo 4? Should I buy Diablo 4? It's tricky. I gave you guys some overall stuff here. I try to give you guys as much as I possibly can, but you really got to take it with a grain of salt because you only can get to level 25. You can only experience one of the 5 world zones or Act 1, as some people might call it, it's like you really can't form an educated opinion on the entire game from the limited little window we're able to see here. You can definitely form an educated opinion on a lot of things and speculate as to how it will advance further. But you can't I can't personally give it a final verdict. Is why I give my overall early access beta impression, which is what I'd say would be somewhere between 7.5 to 8 out of 10 if I'm at my most generous. So that's kind of where I'm putting my overall assessment of the game, my overall impression of the game. Of course, we'll go into more detail of that, but that is not an overall impression of the game. I don't think that's fair to do. I don't think that's um, it is jumping the gun. We just don't know enough about so many of those important systems that really are important to me. And I know are just as important to you if you actually care about playing the game long term. However, the thought it must be said, do I think this game is worth 70 or more dollars? Especially depending on where you live. Other countries where maybe your dollar doesn't go as far as the US dollar. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Considering that there's not as much pay to win as there are in other free ARPGs or lower cost ARPGs. There's no pay to win to speak of except for early access for the most part, things of that nature. And the whole battle pass system, that kind of stuff. Besides that, it's just cosmetics. So I guess this is the price we pay to keep all of that Diablo Immortal garbage out of our ARPGs these days, apparently. Or even to some extent, Lost Ark. This is the price we pay as gamers to actually not have those things in our game. Honestly, it's a lot, but if you adjust for inflation, what games used to cost back then, I'd consider ourselves kind of lucky. Um, you gotta think that top quality games back in the day were far less expansive than this one and didn't get constant updates, and they were like $50. So I don't know. I would say I think it's pretty clear cut based on the amount of stuff in this game that it is worth at least $70. If it costs like 120 in your country, I'm not sure. I think from what I can see already though, you can play this game for a long time and you can totally like waste your life playing this game. So that's worth at least a nice steak dinner if you ask me, or a sushi outing. Sure, at least. Um, of course, that being said, if they start adding those pay to win elements, I think we're getting completely screwed over here. So we'll see how long this lasts, right? I'm skeptical along with the rest of you guys. All right. Of course, my overall verdict is it is already worth $70. Much we can't see yet, but it at least has the potential to be worth $70 as they continue to develop the game. I think that's true. Maybe you might just wait to buy it because you just want to wait until they fix and clean up a bunch of stuff and iron out all the problems with the game as much as possible. That's fair. All right, this is my overall kind of thought, though. This is my thinking on the matter. So I got so many different like comparisons of this game and other games, and of course people are gonna compare it. Um, I thought what this was in a lot of ways. I don't know if this is the best description, but this is what I think would be the best like most honest description. It mostly feels like a massively improved Diablo 3 overall. It's like they took Diablo 3 and then they scratched a bunch of elements, they upgraded a bunch of elements, and then added a bunch of elements. It's kind of what the game is. At least that's kind of my understanding of it. And I'm not a big fan of Diablo 3. Anyone that is in my community knows this. I have a very low opinion of it. I've never streamed it. Um, in general, uh, it's not good. So when I saw this, I was a little concerned. But when you play it, you realize that they really did a ton, and it's no longer Diablo 3 at all. Matter of fact, once you play it, you realize, and when you get past the looking like D3, some of the superficial things like some of the UI and what font and whatever else, and of course, the types of items, maybe even the drop rates. Once you get past some of that stuff, you get through the actual game. Game no longer is Diablo 3. And of course, it's not Diablo 2 either. As a matter of fact, not like any of the games people exactly compare it to. It's like a mix of all these things. It's like you threw them all into like a concoction and just like swirled it around for a while, and then poof, something kind of came out of it. Like you threw like Lost Epic or Last Epic, um, threw in like Lost Ark, Lost Last. It's stuff. Um, Path of Exile. You just throw them all into this pot and start swirling. And D3, even D2, honestly, some very strong D2 vibes from some of the skills, like on the Sorcerer especially. Yeah, you just swirl them all together and see what happens. And then add some other spice that is uniquely Diablo 4, and then you have a game. That's kind of what it felt like to me, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's like they were trying to take some of the best elements of some of these other games and bring them into a game, and trying to make a game for as many people as possible. And considering the size and scope of the game, definitely makes sense. Of course, that does mean that this game will be, console and casual friendly and all those things that some of us hardcore gamers might be repulsed regarding. However, that's a good thing for the gamer community in general, and having a super complicated game isn't always a good thing. But we'll get more into those details in a bit. But overall, I enjoyed playing the beta and feel like this game has massive potential. There are lots of solid implementations that seem to be straight out of other massively successful ARPGs. Yeah, that's what I said. There's some carryovers from D3 I've never been fully sold on. That is true, and they're still in the game. But at least they fit well within the context of this game. And here we go. Alright, so let's start going into some of this. I have a lot of bullet points, pros, cons, neutral. Let's kind of just talk about all these different things here. So the first thing that I felt was really good about Diablo 4 was that gold felt valuable enough with skits with gold sinks to always keep you wanting more. This is good. I like the idea that gold is actually valuable in this game. That's not always the case. Heck, even in Diablo 2, you need tons of gold, billions of it actually, to be valuable. Of course, you can't actually store that much in your stash, but that's what you need. Um, so it seems you need billions of gold to gamble those GG items or to craft those most amazing items in general. So, in general, um, you're always using gold for everything, for upgrading gems, imprinting aspects, uh, upgrading your items, your legendaries, what you can do. The blacksmith. Oh man, there's just so many gold sinks. So many gold sinks. Strangely enough, gambling is not one of them. That has its own currency. The obol, or the donuts, as I like to call them. The purple donuts. They look very tasty, but alas, um, yeah. So I mean, it's interesting though. Like, there's always more gold, and the gold costs get exponential. There's even a lot of really nice item upgrades sometimes you can just find at the vendor in case you're still sitting on a pretty trashy item. So yeah, it's just a lot of gold you can spend. And those costs seem to be exponential, and I imagine that will continue to go up with the uh, how much item power the items have as you continue to level up. So I think gold might always be valuable. Too early to see, but it's pretty important. I like that. I think that's really good. Making sure that it matters to click a bunch of things. The clickables, the interactables are giving you useful materials and gold. Always good stuff. I like that. I actually kind of wish that maybe the clickables would give you even more valuable materials, making even more valuable to click things and not just to kill things, like it kind of was in Diablo 2, where the clickables give you some of the rarest, could give you some of the rarest items in the game. That's definitely something I feel like they could continue hone in on. Boss fights feel a lot more interactive, where positioning and skill usage matters. And this is actually a comparison to Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. I think they made the boss fights finally in Diablo 4 a lot more like PoE, actually. And that's not a bad thing because they do boss fights probably the best in ARPG. The boss HP gets low, it gets stronger, it gets harder just before you finish off the boss, really making you want to finish him off, but it can be dangerous to get close sometimes. It really makes you have to think about how you position and whatnot and with your skills. Now, some people might say, well, not if you use the most OP skills like Hydra and things. Well, yeah, I mean, it'll probably get nerfed. I think devs are watching and they're saying, oh, yeah, there's some skills that are big. But we're not talking balance here. Skills. We're just talking about the boss fights. Boss fights, as far as they're concerned, they're very rich. They feel like, you have to evade the abilities, and evading them is rewarded because you don't start dying rapidly. All that stuff actually seems to matter. And yeah, I can only imagine how much more interesting they get past past the first act if they're already way more interesting than, I don't know, Endariel is in Diablo 2. I mean, we all love the old Endariel and Duriel fights, but let's be honest, they're pretty repetitive and basic, and in most cases you can just face tank them. It's not really quite the case in Diablo 4, which I really like. So yeah, I really like them, honestly. Some people criticize the boss fights a little bit. Maybe there's a few bosses that are like repetitive. That's definitely something they can improve on, but considering how many dungeons they have, it kind of makes sense there's some reuse of bosses. Let's be real. I mean, that's just a lot of stuff to put a lot of dungeons to put bosses into. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense that maybe there's some similar bosses here and there, but overall, seem to be very interesting. They all seem to have different mechanics, dangerous mechanics. Like the one in the basement of Stronghold. Oh man, I think it was like the Core Stronghold. Oh, level 25 one. One had some very interesting mechanics. Could chain you to like, oh man, that was very fun. That was very interesting. It's also somewhat challenging too at that level, so it's kind of cool to check out. But anyway, let's not go on that forever. I just really wanted to hammer that point there. The skill tree, I really like the skill tree. I think it strikes a pretty awesome balance. It has a mix of influences from different games, including Diablo 2, with certain skills, and its feeling of progression from level 0 to 30 skills felt really good. Um, I it kind of does remind me, there's like level 0, 6, level 12, level 18, level 24, level 30 skills. Well, it kind of follows that a bit, it's like there's basic skills, core skills, and you have to like put a certain number of points to get down to the next level of skills. Kind of like you have to get to a certain level to put points to skills as you progress down the Diablo 2 skill trees, which is kind of similar a little bit. Believe it or not, insanely different, but it's like improved in the sense that now there's all these different ways you can modify these skills, and these skills in general, there's just so many ways you can customize your gameplay, and you can tailor them based on how you like to play, or of course how your gear is, which is something we'll get into a bit more later. It feels a lot more rich, a lot more choices and customizations than D3 or even 2 for that matter. Um, yeah, it's just really good stuff in general. And of course, the thing about Path of Exile, right, is that I think what a lot of players feel about Path of Exile is that it's such a crazy game. It's so rich, but it's like unnecessarily overly complicated. That includes like something like the skill tree. So much so that like you gotta read a manual, you gotta watch a super long video. You have to read guides, or you're just gonna mess everything up. It really is punishing in that. And so a game like that, Path of Exile will make you an exile in society because that's how much dedication it will take. You'll have to exile yourself to your mama's basement to spend the time to learn that game. And that's why it's called Path of Exile. It's the path you have to take in life to learn that game. I don't know if anyone's ever made that joke, but I felt like mentioning that here. But anyway, it's like, wow, just so much. In Diablo 4, it's not the case. It really is, it really actually seems like it's reasonable, and yet it's not crazy. Crazy. I don't know. I really like it. I really like how you go down and how you need a certain amount of points to unlock the next tier, and how there's different abilities that do different things, and they're all different how they work. Core skills will consume the resource, and you have other skills that can also like improve like replenishing. You have like different types of skills. There's just a lot of interesting choices you can, depending on hardcore, softcore, your playstyle, your class. Well, of course, these are different depending on the class, but you know what I mean. Like the build, just a lot. I think it's really good. I think there's a lot of choices, while it still seems pretty straightforward. And that's a wrap on that. Gameplay felt much more raw and interactive than. I don't know. Maybe as a more casual observer, or someone maybe that hasn't gotten super deep into these games. I played D4. I've watched D4. But I've also like watched PoE played in D3. I played them too at some point. And these games these days, it's like zoom explode, zoom explode, zoom explode, zoom explode. It's kind of how it is. Now that's D4 could turn into that into the end game to some extent, but even just seeing the main skills that you have, um, available to you, at least before we get to any like enhancements from a Paragon board or something, they seem slowed down. Maybe not quite to the D2 level, but like it's the interaction seems to matter more. Like the order you use your abilities, how that interacts with the aspects on your gear, how you move around. There seems to be more meaningful, me playing this like meaningful decisions about how to use your abilities, especially depending on like what passives, or if you get some of the enhanced effects of some of these abilities as well. That all kind of plays into what you do in an actual battle, and I think that's very satisfying, because even D2 and certain builds don't get to that complexity, but some builds do, and it's nice to see like a little bit of slowed down gameplay where it's not just you jump into monsters for the most part and just explode them instantly, and you grab the resources from them and you're not infinitely sustaining. There's a few exceptions to that, in terms of builds. There's a few builds that seem to be a little zoomed and infinite sustaining, but they seem to be some of the outliers. It seems like most of the builds are satisfying, most of the skills are satisfying, if you build them with the right items. I mean, I even tried some off, quote unquote. I mean, metas are already forming. Let's be real, people. But um, I even tried some somewhat off meta things just to see kind of worked, and they're solid. They might not be quite as strong as the meta things, but they work as long as you have the right gear and the right playstyle and use the abilities effectively depending on the situation. Um, it's really nice to see, situation actually matter in terms of how you fight. Um, of course, like I said or briefly mentioned, this is for the exception of, a few builds where rolling your hands across the keyboard was the best effect. That is a bit of a criticism in my pros, but I mean, it seemed to be more of the exception than the rule. If you want to make most builds and build paths effective, it wasn't. Rolling your hand across the keyboard was not effective. However, if you're using Hydra, Frost Nova, double armor, triple barrier, quad barrier, sorceress, that was definitely the most effective strat. So, um, yeah, it just I was literally just rolling my hand across the keyboard. It's fun, but maybe they ought to look into that a bit. Balance is one of the toughest things. Let's be real. They got to get a lot of testing before player testing helps so much. Especially if you have like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of players testing it. That's when you really the developers learn about the truth about the balance of their game, and that's where the initial balance will start to play. So I don't really fault them too much. They need things like betas to figure things like that out. But yeah, it's pretty good. Like I said, skills have limits to how much they allow you to zoom. Doesn't seem like you just infinitely use teleport, at least not yet. It doesn't seem like there's other dashes. That's a good sign. I think that's a sign that game will be a bit slowed down. That will be interesting. All right, the graphics and environment in general are much more Diablo-like than Diablo 3 ever was, turning to the grim, grisly scenes in a much darker color palette for the game in general that are much more typical of earlier versions of the franchise, with so many ways to interact in the environment, so many things to do everywhere on the map. You feel very immersed in the open world. I gotta say, this is something that actually kind of impressed me. I knew kind of already that the environment and the graphics were gonna be darker, uh, but man, it's wow. This actually felt like a Diablo game again, unlike Diablo 3, and that made me excited to play the game and to keep playing it beta. I didn't drop and throw the controller against the wall 1 hour in because I'm like, this isn't a Diablo game. It actually kind of felt like it was. It's not just the darker colored palette, but there's a lot more grisly, grim scenes. It's a mature rated game. I think D3 maybe been mature rated. I'm not sure, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe they weren't going for that, so they left a lot of that out. This is definitely a lot more gruesome, like D2. And there's so many ways to interact with just everything in the game, even useless interact, breaking stuff that didn't have items. I kind of wished everything items. It was like some pallets and stuff that can't. But once again, I'm a big fan of making clickables potentially a viable strat, so that's not just killing monsters, because that's something that like Diablo 2. Oh yeah. Overall though, you feel very immersed in this world, and you feel like hey, you're actually going through a world full of things to do, explore. I think they did a great job on it. They're going for that open world thing. It's definitely a Diablo open world game. They succeeded in that regard, and I'll give them that A+ on that. And 10. Graphics and cinematics are impressive and immersive with their own character. So I really liked how, a cinematic would include your character with all of the detail you put into it. That's actually kind of cinematic graphics, it's top tier. Blizzard AAA stuff, that's always pretty cool. Level of character customization potential is very high. I thought that was kind of neat. I mean, I've seen games with more customization potential, but overall, it's looking pretty good. And honestly, this is probably just the beginning. They probably limited the amount so that you have to actually pay or play the game at the very least to unlock more customization or to pay for various transmogrifiers. But yeah, um, makes sense. Anyway, that's kind of cool. That you can kind of just play whatever character you want. SimCity is fun sometimes, and that includes customizing your sim, so everyone likes doing that. Item stats feel much more important to your build and playstyle, much how they do in D2, but probably not completely. Um, so this is something that I really didn't like in D3. Let's be honest. In D3, pretty much the only thing that mattered on an item was pretty much, the one stat you needed for the character, the damage number or the defense number. That's pretty much it. Wasn't a lot of depth to any of that. They added a lot of layers of other stuff in this game, and they limited how much crit chance and things you can get, so that you actually have to think about: do you even want to build around crit chance? Do I want to focus on getting lots of crit chance in this build? This is a build that's going to benefit a lot from it, given the skill tree path I want to take. You really got to think about a lot if you want to optimize your build in deep. The legendary item aspects will really change your playstyle. Like I'll give an example on the rogue. Um, if you used an aspect that drops stun grenades every time you baited or you shadow, was a shadow dash, yeah, something like. At any rate, yeah, whatever, yeah, it just teleported to a monster and attacked it. But anyway, yeah. So anytime you used any of those, you would drop stun grenades. So getting more items with that increased the number of evade charges or made it to where your attacks refresh your evade, like on the boots, or just getting more plus skills to that one shadow skill and then using it, and then maybe even using the enhanced version to like lower the cooldown. All of that stuff would like play into the aspect you wanted to use, and it would play into that particular build and setup that was unique to that and unique to the melee rogue. I like the melee rogue the most. So I played the other ones. I thought they were cool, but definitely like the melee rogue, particularly flurry, of course, which I think a lot of other people thought was one of the strongest skills on the rogue as well. But at any rate, really depends. Like sometimes you might just be wasting your time getting critical strike on your gear because you didn't have the build that really supported it. So like there's so many or the skill allocation to support it. So it really depends on just what you're doing about it. But there's also not really too many straight up wrong moves. It seems like as long as you pick skills, modifiers that kind of fit in tandem with the items and the aspects that you add to your legendaries and things like that, and then kind of fit your playstyle, you're gonna have a pretty good time. That being said, of course, there's still optimal skills and others, which is one to kind of balance. But yeah, absolutely. I really think at the moment, even from the first 25 levels, there appears to be a healthy interaction with item stats, playstyle, and the skill tree in Diablo 4, meaning that there's just a lot of customization there that they all fit together to produce a strong character gameplay experience, which is good. But this is something that D3 was sorely lacking. Any depth to the skill tree whatsoever, the skills basically, any depth to the items that reinforce a certain playstyle or choices as to what your skills were. There's no depth at all. I mean, D3 is a pure arcade game. It's hard to even call it an ARPG, nonetheless a Diablo game. I've said this many times on my stream, But I think Diablo 4 breaks out of that. I think it's now finally back in the ARPG Diablo game zone. It's no longer Diablo zoned, I guess. But yeah, at any rate, um, that's all very good stuff. All right, several build approaches for each class felt like strong situationally. So, different types of like ranged rogues were better at different things. Different skills are better at different things. Like rapid fire would be better against bosses, and then penetrating shot, narrow dungeons. That thing was really strong. Rod, is good in general. There's just a lot of things. Didn't seem like there was one way to play each build. Like I tried a bunch of approaches to each build. Everyone thought they had the best one, but what I figured out is it just depended on what dungeon or whether you're fighting a world boss or whether you're clearing a stronghold, whether you whatever. And I'm sure with PvP it will be something totally different as well. So it seems like there's not just one way to play each build. They really tried to expand a lot of options. Some things might be really OP for some types of things, but not for others. And I think this is good. Now, that being said, there are still some things that are probably a bit overtuned or undertuned overall. But that's once again balance. And yeah, that's something that wouldn't expect them to have by the time of the beta. 100% ready to go, fully balanced. Yeah, that's never going to happen in any game, especially of this magnitude. So that's okay. I don't really. I'm not going to even name that as a con really, because to me that's something you expect to improve throughout the life cycle. Pretty much any game, unless they just start adding so much stuff to the game that they can't keep up with balance, like League of Legends or something. But yeah, it's just how it is. Oh man, something in my throat. That law, man, it gets me every time. So anyway, I've definitely played that game. I wouldn't know. But yeah, that's just how it is. Yeah. So people, not just myself, are constantly debating in the chat the merits of various approaches to even the same set of 6 skills in your skill bar. So, the exact passives and everything. Exact the passive bonuses on the skill tree, enhanced effects and what. So yeah, there's just a lot of different ways to do it, and that's great actually. So that means that um, it's gonna be really hard to make like maybe a definitive build guide. You might have to have like a build guide, and it's going to be more like Diablo 2, where there's going to be a lot of like build variants, where you're going to want to do this build if your primary goal is to be good at fighting bosses. You're going to want to do some of these skill switch ups if your primary goal is to do this, and that's how it is in Diablo 2 as well. That's a sign of a healthy interaction in the card. So that's really good. Picking up all kinds of items felt meaningful. Useful materials to generate from them, even if you didn't need them for your build. Now, some people find this as a bit of a chore. Like, there's all these rare items and blue items, and all dropping everywhere, and you have to pick them all up. So you can get enough gold and enough salvage materials to upgrade your items and whatnot. I think that's probably true, but I think that's a good thing because it means like you actually have to pick things up and then you actually have to look at them. And in a lot of cases in this game, since rares, you can make legendaries from really strong rares, it forces you to look at items for possible upgrades. I think that's kind of neat. It gives you a reason. So, like, let's say you have a bunch of legendaries or a bunch of uniques in Diablo 2. If you pick, most of the time, you don't even pick up rares and blues. And the reason why, because you can't, like, recycle them into anything except for gold, which isn't very useful in that. And then, of course, you just end up leaving them on the ground. In this case, you don't leave them. Blues can sometimes win out, too. Some of the magic items. Of course, the rares can straight up win out and you can transfer your legendary aspects to them if they have just better base stats for your build. So it's really cool that the game gives you reasons to pick up those items even if they're not good, so you can salvage them, but also so that you have a reason to check them for upgrades. I didn't really have a problem with it. Some people criticized, um, how many rares are dropping, things like that. But I think, given that rares can become the strongest items on your build, it kind of makes sense. Um, and of course, you're constantly needing upgrades to keep up with monsters that are keeping up with you and your level. So that also kind of makes sense. You just need a lot of items. So it's going to be a little different than a game like D2, where you're not necessarily getting just like one set of upgrades and whatnot. Like once you find that GG item, I mean, you're set for life, right? It's a little different. It's a little different. You constantly upgrade your items. It feels in Diablo 4, and I'm sure that will continue on to the end. So that kind of was cool. I mean, you can really get into just optimizing your build at every point. I thought that was kind of, and just because the color of something that's dropping feels like it might be much, doesn't really mean it's of actual character. It's a it's an important thing. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so almost done with the pros here. I like the evade mechanic. I think that's really cool. It's something you might see in some other ARPGs as well, and how the game has aspects and other things that I actually really like. How not it's not just the 6 skills on your bar. You have a seventh skill, which is evade. And evade interacts and sometimes can create other skills. You can use it to move faster. You can use it to dodge enemy boss attacks. It's actually really cool. It ends up being really improves the flow of combat just having that. That was really respecing felt very forgiving in the early levels. Yeah, it was very forgiving. Level 25, it cost like 4,000 gold respect. That wasn't too bad. I think the problem probably comes when you're finalizing your build. You're like level 50, you're going on to the Paragon levels. Yeah, trying to respec your build at that point insanely expensive. So it's definitely exponential. But what that does mean is that if you want to change your build and you don't like where you're going and you feel like you're progressing too slow, want to change what or you're just bored with what you're doing, it's really easy to respec early on. It costs nothing until like level 12, so nothing at all, pretty much, or literally nothing. So yeah, it's pretty easy to mess around with stuff, honestly. I felt like I could change my build all the time, so I could test out different. It wasn't hard. I think that's more of a problem once probably should already be going towards a build with all of your items anyway. And once you're at that point, I mean, may as well make a character. I'd agree with that. But I think the way they did that was actually smart. Overall, I enjoy the events and how you can farm resources that are otherwise rare or others at high efficiency. Properly incentivizing them. Yeah, so they did a good job here creating all these different resources in the game. The donuts where you can get them from certain quests and events, which is nice. And you can't just get them anywhere. Like there's like items you mostly just get by killing monsters, and then the other rewards like experience you can get from events and quests as well. Stronghold capture and just a lot of stuff. I really liked how different types of events definitely felt different from each other. Doing them felt differently high efficiency, but for different reasons. I thought that was good. I feel like they balanced kind of all the aspects of the game pretty well. Like even the sellers, which I don't always understand why you do, but it feels like sometimes you can get really rare items or really rare materials in there. They feel like they just have their own kind of niche. They can probably capitalize on some of these things a bit more, but then of course have to put this here, but it's not really a beta thing. It's just something so people understand that there is indeed no explicit pay to win mechanics besides early access and see what comes of battle passes in its entirety. Seasons actually come to, but for now, I definitely avoid the Lost Ark approach. Definitely the Diablo Immortal approach. I would touch. I didn't even play that game. I refused, and it's because that is disgusting stuff to me. And I say I just don't have a. That's my problem. Um. Anyway, so yeah, I'm just a millennial living in this time. That's my problem for sure. All right. Anyway, neutral observations. So I made a lot of observations that are not particularly good or bad. I feel like I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I feel like these are things that some people might put in the good or bad category, but I really didn't put in the good or bad category. These are just kind of things that are like, yeah, it's a thing. And this is kind of why it's a thing. That's kind of what I do. I try to explain my reasoning behind why I think it's a thing and why I don't think. Or, in general. Some of these things I just don't fault them for because it's a beta and I feel like these things will change. So things like in the con category are things they might not be able to change or might never change just because it seems to be deeply ingrained into the philosophy of the game. So that's a whole nother ballgame. Anyway, mobility still seems to be a key to most aspects of the game, which is why early game barbarians which lack mobility. Once again, I don't have like direct experience with this, but that's what it looks like. It looks like they're always running stuff. It's hard for them to hit things. They're always chasing the monsters, or often left behind. Whereas like rogue and sorcerer, a lot of ways to close the gap. Not just not just evade. So yeah, that's mobility is always a key aspect to ARPGs or MMOs or whatever, and yeah, that's just something I observed. You could put this in the con category for barbarians, but once again, it's like a balance issue. So it's just an interesting aspect that they're still putting a lot of cool, interesting mobility interactions in the game. The game has elements from both popular MMOs and RPGs, broadening the world of Diablo. So this game really does feel like a concoction, a lot different approaches to different aspects of ARPGs from many different popular games. I think I think in my chat I've seen a comparison of this game or various aspects of it to literally every other ARPG in existence. Um, literally, like joke. Which tells me that they are drawing from the wealth of knowledge that exists everywhere. So that's kind of interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, you even have people saying there's elements of Diablo Immortal in it, which there are obviously not the pay to win, thankfully. You have people saying there's Diablo 3 in it. I've definitely seen the Diablo 2 in it. Definitely. Maybe not a ton, but it's there in some of the skills and otherwise. I see, a lot of the themes and the quest systems, you might think that's reminiscing Lost Ark a bit. There's a lot of other stuff as well. You got Path of Exile boss fights. This is, and some of the monster combat looks sometimes as well. Not quite as zoomy though. Maybe a bit more smooth. So like, yeah, obviously more well articulated as well. See the monsters. So yeah, there's a lot of elements here, which is kind of interesting. Sorcerer and Rogue felt significantly stronger, according to most, and the Barbarian. This is an observation I made from people saying. And of course, after testing the Sorcerer and Rogue, I thought both were insanely strong, which tells me that if everyone was thinking Barb was weak, it probably was, especially compared to the other two classes that were available in the access beta, what this video is being based on here. And there's a whole bunch of abilities I list here that felt really disproportionately powerful to all these other abilities. So, even if some of these felt disproportionately powerful, like I said, I even tried doing quote unquote not meta, and they still felt effective. Maybe some skills like Meteor I thought felt kind of overwhelming. That's true too. This is all a balance thing, though. This is just an observation that balance definitely could be improved. Lots of problems with loading, causing FPS drops and not happening properly. Yeah, so some people said they didn't encounter a lot of bugs, but every bug I encountered had something to do with going to the blacksmith too quickly, skipping text too quickly, dashing into a town too quick. In some cases, you dash into a town and it doesn't load any of the NPCs. I mean, that happened. Got issues with the camera actually getting stuck after loading an area too quickly and not being able to leave a very small section of without exiting the game. Things like that. And of course, FPS dropping every time you're loading into an area. So that's just that's just optimizations. And once again, feels like more of a beta problem. Kind of like also queue times, server queue times. That's definitely something they're trying to test beta as well. So I don't really consider these problems of the game unless they somehow persisted. Um, you know, probably like a month or more past launch, right? So like this is stuff you're gonna expect with a new to some degree. Absolutely gonna be the case there. All right, so here, right? So the gems being able to be socketed in items opens up the possibility of runes in the future. It'd be very easy for add runes or runes based on what I've already seen. Um, which yeah, just tells me that there's a lot of possibilities with that. I think that would be something very possible, even probable expansion in the future. But I'm already seeing like gems and sockets and things like that. So they didn't have runes until the Diablo 2 expansion. So I think we could see some very interesting things in the future in that. No inventory Tetris required since Diablo 2, so this is a continuation from everything takes up equal space, and there's no balancing of inventory space in a game. Or some people like inventory Tetris and think it causes meaningful decisions to be made in the game. I would say that's the case. D2, that's how it works. However, many fans of D2 mods like PD2 do not care as much because just have a charm inventory, so no choice into the inventory for them either. I think most people in general don't like to choose whether or not to pick up an item, and especially considering that there's so many items that can be salvaged or sold for gold and useful materials because there's so many ways to upgrade items. Kind of makes sense that you don't want to really limit the. So, in this game, that's just how it works. I think some people kind of lament this, but I personally see the pros and cons of approaches. I do think it's kind of strange that an enormous item takes up the same space as a tiny gem, for instance. So it's kind of weird, I guess, in terms of realism. But this is a fantasy game, dark fantasy game. So, I mean, that's how it was in Link's inventory in Legend of Zelda. So everything took up equal amount of space there too. So it's one of those approaches that will debate. I think most people don't really care. Just want more space all the time. So not too many people complaining about that, including myself. I can do it either way. I like PD2, which is a Diablo 2 mod, the most popular one in existence. I like D2R as well, where it's a lot more limited. I think they both have pros. Only can have 6 skills on your active skill bar. Now you might be wondering, Dark Humility, you didn't put that in your cons? There are so many other content creators, I'm sure, that would have put this in their cons. Why is that? This is primarily to balance the game. Yes. Um, this is to balance the game. That much is true. Examino took it. They know it. It's true. So, one thing that this is one of my original thoughts once again, before I ever watched anything else, is that I believe this is actually something they can't change, and it's also something they won't change. No matter how much people complain about it, especially us D2 people that, might put 11 hotkeys on the bar for a build. Some builds only require like 4, but, yeah. What's going to happen if you can just put as many skills as you want and assign them to hotkeys is that the meta will become putting one skill point into every ability and then literally rolling your fingers across 12 keys to place them all at the same time, especially the ones that don't require resources to spend. And this is just how the game is designed. They don't want everything to be a resource spender. It's not like, Diablo 2 where everything spends a resource or everything. It's just it does or it doesn't. Ones that don't are rare. Passive or something. And in some cases, those passives even regenerate the resource, which is mana. Just mana. That's it, is one resource. Diablo 2. That works. It does. But anyway, yeah, that's what's gonna happen. So if you have like 10 to 12 skills on your active skill bar, why not just put 1 point until practically everything on your skill tree and then just like use 20 hotkeys, just use all of the abilities at once. I mean, that would be the most effective thing to do. Just get the skills. You can get as many cooldowns as you want too, then. Just get as many non resource spenders, especially further down the tree. You can even pull resource spenders too with enough regen. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think they did that for that reason. Trying to keep every type of skill different, but they also don't want you to get like every single one of each skill. And yeah. Now I do recognize that this does dumb down the potential complexity. Once again, I mean, most builds, even Diablo 2, don't require like. Anyway, uh, most builds, if I'm being honest, require like 3 to 5 skills, with the option of using like 3 additional skills. It's pretty close, especially if you add the dog. It's interesting, but anyway, it's just how it is. Of course, this is also to accommodate console play, which may have additionally affected the balance skill tree decisions. So, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you only have so many buttons on a controller, but I mean, they could have added more in that case. I just feel like, they wanted you to have to make meaningful choices between skills in the skill tree. To do that, instead of limiting inventory Tetris, they decided to limit, how many skills you could put on the skill bar. So the number of skills ends up being like a limiting resource that funnels and hones in your build. It appears to be what they were doing, at least in my. Some people might just think it's it's for it's the whole console thing. Well, that's probably also true, but I think they were thinking more along the lines of they didn't want every build to be exactly the same and it's like all the skills basically. So yeah, by limiting something, you actually end up expanding options. The inventory, I don't think sees it that. All right, the drop rate of magics, rares, and legendaries appears quite high. Well, that is true. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, though, seems to be a reason for that. It's because the just constant gear improvements necessary to keep up with the game, um, and it's also because of how many ways you can upgrade the build and how many you must salvage to upgrade items. It makes sense. I observed there's no mercenary. Maybe I just didn't do that quest. I don't think so though. I was not able to have a mercenary. You get one later. Kind of interesting. I mean, I remember in Diablo 2 at least that was the thing. Even in Diablo 3, I remember mercenary pretty early. Like a mercenary is kind of part of Diablo, so I hope to see it. Maybe I just didn't encounter it. I just didn't see it. It's interesting though. I like the idea of having someone fight by your side though. So consideration. Maybe they totally scrapped that in favor of a horse. I don't know. It's possible. I don't think a horse you can ever replace a mercenary. Dynamic level scaling. Monster scaling in level to keep up with your level seems to be a function of trying to make the game a true nonlinear open world experience and for everything to be challenging throughout the game, whichever order you decide to do any aspect of the game, such as a quest or a dungeon. In. Okay, so this is basically a function of the open world. There's a lot of buzz around this dynamic level scaling. What does it mean? All it means is that you can, no matter what order the quests or what monsters you encounter, period, throughout the whole world, even the open world of the peaks, is out there in the world. You will always be encountering monsters that are your level, unless you're taking over a stronghold or something, and the monsters above your level slightly, or they might be fixed to some degree. But yeah, I I think this was really what they were trying to go for. Is that they didn't want you to feel forced to necessarily progress down the quest line or do anything necessarily because one thing I noticed in this game that I thought was fun is that you could kind of just explore the game in whatever you wanted, whatever order, and you could be rewarded for it. And it didn't feel like you were going to be that far behind anyone else that did anything else in particular. That being said, some things like events, especially in a group, would best experience, yada yada. But still in general though, you could go for you could go for certain aspects first. You could just level up in all the dungeons. You never had to do any of the quests if you didn't. Yeah, you could kind of just do whatever you wanted, which is actually kind of interesting. Um, However, this does have some drawbacks, and there's a lot of criticisms people have levied at this, and I'm not sure whether or not to put this in the this is something I really want to see as it develops further in the game because there's a lot of pros to this, like such as like I said, it's not just a linear progression. Like you have to go from here to 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 level up optimally. Also, you can kind of do whatever you want and join up with other players in the game that are lower level than you, and you guys can have a similar experience. So I kind of understand what they're going for here, but it's still kind of strange. Because this leads to not feeling like you're ever really getting stronger or weaker relative to the monsters. As long as your gear keeps up. If it doesn't, then you just feel like weaker every level, which is backwards from how virtually every other operates. Get more gear and more levels, and you feel like the monsters get weak in comparison, and you can really feel that power spike, and it feels great. It just feels it's just exhilarating. Problem with this though is you never really get to feel that, which means that what the game does is it kind of forces you in a lot of cases to really think about upgrading gear as you continue through the game. You can't just use trash gear like in Diablo 2 or, play naked and then get all the way through hell mode. Practically, it's not really going to work here because the monsters are constantly working with you as you continue through. So it's a fundamentally different game and approach, but it makes sense for what they're trying to do in this open world and of making it a game. And so that, when you're doing quests that matter, you're not just blowing past everything. Not everything is trivial or stupid. Um, every time you clear a dungeon, it's gonna be slugfest. It's gonna be. So I think I get it. I think I get it. This tiering of the world itself seems to control the difficulty more than anything. So this is my point on whether or not, like, I think a lot of people, at least in my chat, were describing this as a bad thing, but I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure is because you might still be able to feel weaker or stronger relative to monsters, especially with the Paragon system as well. So we're not really sure past the like level 150. Maybe this is just how it feels 1 to 50, and it makes sense for the context for this part of the game. The other thing that seems to matter is the world tier. So if you go back to World Tier 1, I mean, most of us, I think, just played World Tier 2 because that's how you got the best loot and rest the fastest. That makes sense to me. But let's say you went back to World Tier 1. Now all of a sudden you feel really strong relative to those monsters because they are weaker and you are still the same strength you were in World 2, and then you're just going to destroy things at similar levels even faster. So that is an interesting point. But of course, one of the main benefits is more experience and more loot. So if you don't want those, but you just want to complete quests, maybe you can go down to World Tier 1 and just destroy everything. So that's still a way you can feel stronger. See, they also have this tiering system. And I feel like that's where you're really going to feel stronger or weaker relative to. So not the level per level per level like in a classic ARPG, not from level to level, but it's gonna be between those actual world tiers, the tier of the world itself, like in Nightmare and then Hell, Inferno, and whatever. Um, that's gonna feel like it's a lot harder, and you get gear in there, you're gonna feel a lot stronger back if you go back to tier 2, for instance. So I think this is where that feeling of being strong is going to come to effect. So that might be fine. And considering, what they try to achieve with making you be able to do whatever in whatever order and for it to still feel challenging, to still kind of balance out anyone being able to play with anyone else, kind of nice. And it's not a bad system. I don't think fundamentally, and I think it makes sense given what they're doing with this open world Diablo. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I think about this. I think my thought might be a little different from some people. Some people might have a lot of reservations about this, but I don't know. I think the problem is in the beta. We all just played World Tier 2, so I think you go backwards with the gear you got in World Tier 2, you're gonna destroy everything. I said I think you guys should try that out yourself and you'll feel it. Maybe you'll feel it. I don't know. Of course, some people don't think that's acceptable because the level of loot will drop. That's I don't know, just want to destroy shit. So I don't really see the problem with that fundamentally. I'm gonna take a hit out of the way. But if you want to feel stronger or weaker, there you go. There you go. That is a way. Absolutely. Um, I do see the drawback though. I do see it. It's kind of. It just feels like no matter what, it's gonna be a slugfest, and it seems like you really gotta constantly be optimizing stuff. But I feel like that was one of the more addicting aspects of the game. Anyways, that's maybe not a terrible thing. Anyway, last neutral point: D4's smart loot system seems fine oftentimes. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of smart loot, but it seemed okay because you actually were able to get a decent amount of items for other classes the way it is. But I think it'd be nice to be able to scale it up to having no smart loot at all. So if you didn't care about upgrading your character anymore, you really could get items for other characters, which was a really fun part of Diablo 2, I remember. I know everything that's fun at all is missing from D3 at the very least. So I I think they really could go far with this. I really do think they could. Imagine if there was like an option settings where you could just set your smart loot. Its default is, normal smart loot thing, but so that's more focused on your class, which is fine for progression in this game. But let's say you just want to get items completely random. You just love the RNG. Listen, you love being able just to gear up other classes equally to your own. Why not just be able to turn it on? That would be, or at least have a sliding scale, from like 0%, the normal like 100% smart loot to like 0% smart loot. They could do that. I think that's something they could program. Um, I don't know if they'll do it, but interesting. That being said, I don't really consider this a con because currently I think it works okay. It's not ideal, like I said, but it's not okay. It's okay for the most part. All right, so last but not least, cons. That's right. Even though I gave this game overall rating of 7.5 to 8 out of 10, quite a few points I have here. Things that I definitely think are real things to think about. If you want reasons not to buy this game, this is where you should look. um, Anything that maybe can help justify why you already weren't going to buy this game, because boycott Blizzard forever. I mean, I try to keep an open mind, so that's why I played through this, and I'm gonna play the open beta. I'm gonna play the next two classes, Necromancer and Druid, from March 26th. You can see that is what. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I try to keep an open mind, and like you said, like I made all these bullet points, and this is very Rax like. I feel like him and I are somewhat similar sometimes. Methodical uh, note writing in terms of a bad game, but I think I don't know. It's very. I think cons are important. I think it's important to understand what's really good so that you're balanced and that just not just meme blasting a game. That's what I call it, is meme blasting it. It's like shitting on it. Other people shitting on it, whatever. Um, and so you're also understanding, things that maybe have both pros and cons, or maybe just are observations about how the game works. Um, Separating that stuff from things that are bad. So let's go into what I thought. Lacks innovation. Not a ton of new implementations. As I was playing this game, I didn't see anything that I thought was so different from any other ARPGs on the market. They integrated things from World of Warcraft, even. World boss and mounts and stuff. Yeah, open world, of course, you kind of have to integrate, some of this quest stuff for sure. Um, Almost everything you see in D4 already be found, except for maybe some of their itemization systems, which uh, uniquely D4 and some of the other stuff. But the skill tree is also unique as well. But as you can see, I'm sure the Paragon system will be to some degree. It's like there's a lot of things pretty much directly compared to what already exists. Some people might say, well, for a game with a budget like that, maybe they could have come up with some groundbreaking. It's like Diablo historically has been a franchise, at least in ARPGs. Now it's like crossing over to MMOs a little bit, which can bring some people from those. But it yeah, I mean, it has a history, a long legacy since Diablo 2 of being a groundbreaking franchise, a game that every other game wanted to be. Once Diablo 2 came out, I can promise you the clones started coming off the conveyor belt. 100%. Every game was trying to emulate that success. Like, even Path of Exile was pretty much originally. It's original implement, not the mod. But still, still, that's the thing. Is like everyone looked to Diablo 2. Heck, even Diablo 3 had a ton of MMOs, not MMOs, sorry, ARPGs trying to emulate Diablo 3. Look at Wolcen, for instance, maybe some of the less successful ones and the more successful ones, trying to emulate Diablo 3. Diablo 4 seems to be doing more emulating, though, of other games. um, Maybe its own stations, which means that not as much innovation as you maybe want to see in this genre. They definitely could have come up with earth-shattering systems. They could have really switched it up, but it decided. I think instead they tried to make a game that is a little bit of everything for everyone that likes all these different games, and of course its own game. And that can come with problems sometimes. Come with problems. I think it's a little disappointing, but it's also not insanely surprising. Considering there's all these different ideas, and it's hard to find something under the sun that actually works and isn't garbage. So being safe is difficult. Innovation's getting tougher. It's easier to kind of rehash ideas that already work. It's the same thing every industry. So I don't know. What can I say? The gaming industry is coming of age. It's becoming like every other industry, like the music industry. Gotta find their pop. The types of sounds and combinations tend to get people jumping. It's the same stuff. They got a meta. RPGs and MMOs got metas now. They're coming of age. They've been around long enough to where people are kind of taking ideas from each other. And to see this earth shattering idea is actually rare. That being said, I think Diablo 4 is still making some waves. Will it be enough to be as groundbreaking as its predecessors? So far, it does not appear that way, but maybe it could. That being said, the way it brings together so many ideas and concepts used before is practically seamless, so this is actually a positive note. Recognize, even if it's not innovating its own things too much, it's bringing together so many ideas and concepts from other games. It's putting them together in a very seamless, rich experience. So Diablo 4 is still a unique game just by virtue of combination. Alright. How it combines just so many things. Alright, some game events such as the appearance of the Butcher or the World Boss felt overly punishing in terms of how easily they could kill you. I definitely felt this way, and as a hardcore player, someone who plays mostly hardcore in Diablo 2, this is kind of troubling. It's like, I actually want to play hardcore in this game. Um, I don't know. It just felt like you could die at any time from the butcher just randomly spawning, or just a really bad combination of elite mods, or just not going almost pure defensive skills in some cases. One wrong move against the boss. Definitely how it kind of felt a bit, particularly with the world boss and the butcher, though. This feels like a situation you don't want to just save and exit before you get hit. And in this one, you ever got touched, it was a one shot. So people in hardcore just using Hydra from 2 screens away to kill it. I mean, the most overpowered skill in the game currently. Really cheesy. Doesn't bode well for hardcore so far. They don't fix these issues before the game comes out, I will be playing softcore instead of hardcore, but I think that's normal to expect, as I feel like I want hardcore to feel fair, right? It's gotta feel hard but fair. So far with some of these mechanics, it doesn't feel fair. And Diablo 2 hardcore to me is fair. So far, these things don't feel fair. I don't want to just die for no. Also, there's server issues and everything for seasons anyway. So I typically just want to play softcore to learn the game anyway. So there's a lot of reasons why I might just play softcore. It's just one of them. We'll see. Of course, in Diablo 2, I played the death out of the game at this point, so it's the only way I feel any kind of sense of danger. While there are varied means to unlock the boss in various dungeons, many dungeons end up feeling very similar to. Yeah, so this is something I really hope they can like enrich our experience in, because even though a lot of the dungeons, the environments look different, the monsters are different in a lot of cases, and even the bosses were different, it kind of felt like a pretty similar formula every time. It was like you go to the boss, I mean, you go into the dungeon, you have to like find the things to put on the pedestals, or, find the key, or kill these elites, or kill every monster, and then the boss door opens, and then you kill the boss. It just felt very repetitive. And I feel like a lot of people were also observing this. If this is how the end game is, this is going to bode very badly for this game. The evaluation of it will drop significantly unless more variation is introduced. If this is the primary end game, if this is just a quest thing to get certain aspects, it might not be that bad. But it's it's definitely not great. Um, Sometimes it's even frustrating. There's just a lot of backtracking too involved in getting these items and sitting there and channeling for a billion hours to put these things on there. It just, I don't know. It feels really weird compared to the pace of the rest of the game. I don't understand why you can't just like instantly place something on a pedestal, for instance. Um, Maybe that's like a loading problem. I don't know. At any rate, it's, yeah. I think they can introduce more variety in how things work. Heck, maybe there's a dungeon where the boss literally chases you. You don't even go into a boss room. Like the whole thing just feels too predictable. Why not just have the boss just randomly like in the middle of the dungeon somewhere? You just find it in a random spot, and the whole point is like to search for the boss. You know, but it doesn't require any like items to activate it. And while you're searching, you'll encounter all these other monsters, of course. But why can't they have something like that? Can't they have like a dungeon where, I don't know, instead of you finding the monsters are looking for you. So you'll have monsters just come off screen and start attacking you, trying to surround you all sides in various points. Like, you just have like different dungeons where there's like different curses and the monsters just have different behavior patterns, that. I don't know. I mean, I think that could be all things. You could still have the ones with the, activate the finding the Indiana Jones pieces to open up the door type thing as well. I mean, you can definitely. That's not a problem fundamentally. It's just having that every single time pretty much be the case. In some cases, you had I think have to find like a lever that's like in one little corner of the dungeon. If you just happen to not explore that exact corner, you might end up having to go all the way back to the beginning to get it. I don't know. I ended up having to like double, triple search the dungeons sometimes, backtracking so many times just to find little objects. And well, that might be cool for some dungeons, just as a part of the challenge. Making that thing in every dungeon, it's probably not. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that, though. All right. It appears like there are cheat and death mechanics in hardcore, so I guess the sorcerer has them. Yeah, same as Diablo 3, and then PoE that make it to where it sets it to softcore. I don't know. Maybe this is my Diablo 2 bias. It's true that I'm a Diablo 2 player through and through, but like, why can't we return to just like hardcore? I don't know. Like, why can't we just return to hardcore? Hardcore is hardcore. Your character's dead. Can't play it anymore. That's what hardcore used to mean in Diablo 2, Diablo 1. I think that's something that was quintessentially Diablo. That was like in no other game, and it's something they really could have maintained. Um, I really hope this isn't a class specific thing, because then that's really gonna skew hardcore as well with a cheat death and all. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm feeling hardcore in this as much as I was feeling it in Diablo 2. Diablo 2, I think, is a genuine, fair, hardcore experience that is also unforgiving. But I think it's a good experience. Um, he definitely captured it perfectly in that game, and I really hope maybe they see the light at some point. Probably not. This is just one of those carryovers from D3 that I'm just not super wild about, including no ability to scale up smart loot, which is, I consider that neutral because I think D4 smart loot is okay, but said it's just rough around the edges, not ideal. World bosses can feel frustrating when you have a team that is not capable of defeating them. The team is made up of randoms. Yeah, so this I don't know how I feel about world bosses. I think some people really liked it or really enjoyed the experience. Maybe this is like me not having enough experience in MMOs, which is I think a fair charge against my gaming history. Just not liking MMOs as much as ARPG in general. But I or maybe it's that Diablo 4 doesn't have a good infrastructure for it, which is I think another problem as well. It just feels like RNG, just straight up RNG, whether or not you're in a game instance with people that are strong enough to actually fight the boss with you, and then you can actually kill within the time limit. And I feel like that RNG of just being paired with complete randoms and potentially failing or succeeding can have a huge impact on game progression because he drops a lot of really good items. I I don't know. I don't know about this. At least in its current iteration, I feel like there's gotta be some more ability to affect it as an individual. Um, Whether or not you can actually defeat this boss. Make it to where maybe like you have to hit a certain level. You can't just do it with like low levels. I mean, I don't know. Just feels like a lot of time can be wasted due to that. It's just hard to say. And then, of course, there aren't really many existing game systems to really make fight these bosses. Of course, you can join on friends, but that's about it. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's a little interesting. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on it. Maybe not. I definitely felt like it was a little haphazard though, for sure. Um, Maybe I just don't like how that feels. I also don't feel like your abilities really cooperate on the same level as like WoW, where you have healers and whatnot and stuff. So I don't know. How does this fit into a Diablo game? This is I guess the I guess I kind of throw up my hands here. I'm not sure. It's definitely interesting. I think there's some really cool aspects to it, and then there's also especially the fight itself, and but I think there's definitely some drawbacks maybe in terms of putting a lot of emphasis on something so so crazy in terms of the chaos involved. But I guess that's the point maybe. Okay, anyway. Often could not skip certain dialogue, possibly due to bugs. Dialogue was often disproportionate to the fight as well. Yeah, sometimes you get like a billion dialogue scenes to skip and you kill like one monster. I think it was like what was it? Sister Octavia or something. Oh man, those quests were so silly. It just like went through a billion dialogue, killed like a monster once, exercise the demon. I didn't think. Sometimes you couldn't even skip it. I don't know if that was a bug thing. I think sometimes you had to like reload so that that would actually happen. I don't know. Some of them I just think you couldn't skip straight up. So yeah, they fixed those issues. That might be some beta problems there. So we'll have to see. But yeah. Also, if they're gonna make the fight super easy and disproportionate to the dialogue, maybe they should make the fight a bit more worth all of that. Yeah, just felt like there's some things that just weren't worth it because of that. Most stuff was worth it, but there's some instances of things. Absolutely. Okay, so last three major points here: multiplayer dynamic scaling, monsters to character level seems kind of ridiculous on its face. You have level fives attacking the same monsters and killing them proportionally faster than and this is because their monster that they're fighting right next to you are level 30 monsters, whereas the level 5 is fighting the same monsters at level 5. Like I said, this is this is one of those products of the open world and trying to make the game non-linear. And also, multiplayer couch co It's it's very interesting. It's very interesting indeed. That being said, what you experience as the player feels still balanced to what you're doing. So I don't know. This is definitely one of those things kind of thrown in for casual gamers, though. I do wonder if for multiplayer maybe they should like average the character levels. Maybe that'd make it better. But then level 30 couldn't get experience, so I don't know. I guess this is just something that's going to be in the game because of how they made it. I really don't expect this to disappear, but it is kind of weird and it's a little ridiculous how it works in some ways if you think. But it's just how the game works, I suppose. Um, and this is just a point I've made before. The game does feel like they are trying to satisfy so many players at once. MMO players, RPG players, players that like cosmetics, players that just like items, players that um, like to do quests, players that don't like to do quests. players that like dungeons, players, I don't know. Diablo 4 is supposed to be everything for every kind of player. And that kind of makes sense when you're trying to make money because you want to sell as many copies as many possible. The only problem is when you try to satisfy, casual gamers, experienced gamers, they're trying to satisfy everyone at once. And when you do that, there are consequences no matter how you do it. I think Diablo 4 might be like one of the best combinations of compromises between trying to satisfy so many types of players all at once that I've ever seen. Um, However, even with that being the case, uh, there's gonna be some negative effects from this because you're as you try to satisfy all these different players, no one will end up completely satisfied. It's like when you try to be liked by everyone, and then in the end you end up liked by nobody because you're nothing to anyone in particular, just a fake. You're just copying what other people do. People end up seeing through you, and then and does that mean Diablo 4 is gonna feel fake? Go all the way through the game? Is it gonna feel like a very refined experience? We're so refined and distilled, through so many test tubes of other games that it's just like a scientifically bland experiment that you just can't see yourself going through with, and that's possible. I definitely think that it's going to be at least really fun to play through. Quest line's going to be solid, and I think it's going to be fun to try all these different skills and items. But the truth is are you going to want to grind this game, all the way to Paragon 100 or whatever? This is something that isn't going to feel like you're just the same thing over, with very little feeling of progression, a feeling of getting stronger, something that this dynamic scaling costs. Are you just gonna feel like you're kind of just doing stuff? Better off just playing D4 on one screen than watching Netflix on the other. Is it that kind of bland experience? And I don't think it is. I don't think it is personally because how the boss fights feel, how the actual combination of skill use can matter in a lot, except for like the most insane ones. I do feel like these are signs that it won't be like that. However, you know, if all the dungeons kind of feel the same and you have dynamic scaling, this doesn't feel like you're just becoming a Super Saiyan, except every once in a while. Which power spike items or like ultimate skill or something. So I don't know. I don't know. I I'm kind of reserving my judgment, but at the same time, can feel some blandness already in the beta, which is not a good sign and definitely one of the cons. Anyway, and then of course you can't trade everything. As someone who loves being able to trade everything, such as in other games like PoE and 2 and things like that, this to me is, I don't know. I feel like a robust trade economy is one of those things that really people engage in the game and also reward them playing your game because they can even make a living doing so to some extent. That being said, the rare items are actually really strong indeed because you can even turn them into legendary as long as the stats are good enough. So this might not be that big of an issue. However, I did put it here because I don't personally see why, if that's already the case, that the rares are often the best legendary bases because of aspect imprinting. I don't see why they just don't allow everything. I think that people are bots are just gonna bot rares at this rate. You're not reducing bots by not, so I just don't see what they think they're pushing. That being said, all the cool item interactions, I'm really glad there's no sets because sets get out of control. Diablo 3 and stats are disproportionate in Diablo 3. They're definitely a lot more methodical. Thought about all those interactions indeed. So, just finished the con, so remember my original rating. I actually thought this was a very solid game experience throughout the early access beta. There's definitely issues, for sure. Things that I am not totally wild about. Some things that I think are maybe a little unfinished in terms of the dynamic experience throughout the whole game, or one that makes, hardcore feel stand out from or some other frustrations as well. Some things that are kind of strange. But overall, I went over so many pros, just a ton, almost uncountable, and then a lot of neutral observation. I do realize this is a long video and it's a little late, but it's actually still before the open beta, so you want to get an idea all these different ideas, so you guys can maybe form your opinions about the game. There's gonna be a lot more people able to play an open beta. So, pay that extra amount or whatever, ultimate or the below that edition, or get some early access codes through eating KFC or anything crazy like that. Now you can just play it and don't, I think, even have to have a game. You can just play it and try it out. So I hope you guys all learned a lot through this experience here. A lot of balancing. Barbarian needs buffs. Some skills need nerfs, particularly sorcerer skills in most cases, and some other skills can use some. Obviously, the balance isn't perfect. Some issues that maybe never will change, but not insane issues. Overall, this game was a real experience. I'm saying that as a dedicated Diablo 2 player who still sees Diablo 2 as the best standard bearer of the series overall. I still think this will be the case even before it comes out. Truly dedicated Diablo 2 players, I don't think will be phased much by this game because they did so many things so well. It doesn't have all the crazy amount of endgames this is gonna have, and a lot of other ARPGs already have, like Path of Exile, so many other ones as well recently. But that all being said, this is a good sign. All of these things are amazing. I really thought that there are a lot of massive improvements. Even if you think there's still a lot that looks like D3 somewhat, they've really improved so many of those systems and made them 10 times better, in my opinion. I do think this is a game I will want to play at the very least on launch. We'll go hard on it for sure, and then we'll evaluate later whether or not it's going to keep back seasons. Will they modify it enough? Will they bring back some cool aspects from previous Diablo games like runes and rune words, like from 2? Will they continue to evolve, make the game feel more rich and dynamic? It already is. Make you feel like you could truly tailor whatever class to whatever fantasy you want to enjoy, and at whatever level of see. I think they've really done a great job trying to appeal to a lot here. I'm really interested to see how this game continues to develop. At any rate, some of you guys may feel different. Some of you guys may feel like this is a big fail. I feel like a lot of the people just shit posting about it haven't even gotten to play it yet, though. They just kind of watched it. We got to play it to see these differences that I'm describing here. And I hope it's all good. Let's try it so you guys can educated opinion. just some things that are still carryovers from D3 you can't stand. I get it. D3 left a bad taste in a lot of people. I get it 100%. I do ask for people to maintain an open mind, though, if possible. At any rate, I will, of course, have a few chapters so you guys can refer to various parts of this video. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, of course. Always helps. Comment on it. Give me your thoughts. What did you think? You guys have a more positive experience or negative experience? You think I am correct or very wrong on some of these? You think my thoughts are original or other people similar thoughts? I don't know. I definitely, after writing this, saw some other people and did realize there is a lot of similar veins of thought, but not everything is exactly the same, which means I think developers might be getting sent a somewhat unified message, which means that's a good sign. Because maybe they'll just make good changes that everyone agrees with. Because they'll see all the feedback, and all the feedback is the same, roughly speaking. Maybe not identical. There's like a similar vein throughout all the feedback. Yeah. It makes them like one thing that I didn't even put in my thoughts that I saw in some feedback on some other videos was like about like the UI. I didn't really hate the UI. I thought it was okay. But then again, I'm not overly critical of things like the UI, I guess. But I also remember people complaining about it in my chat as well. I mean, yeah, there's some small improvements they could make on it. Don't get me wrong, definitely can. I don't know. I didn't like think it like it didn't like ruin my immersion experience. So there's always small improvements. Don't get me throughout the board, but I wasn't particularly. This is why I didn't. These were my original thoughts before being tainted by other feedback. So I wasn't concerned with it. Anyway, um, some people were very concerned with the zooming. um, being able to zoom, you just couldn't zoom out as much like in Diablo 2. I didn't really care, but I put it in my neutral observations. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff for sure. At any rate, though, GG guys once again. You guys are beasts, and hope to see you guys on the open beta Diablo 4, and continue to see you guys on D2R as we come up for launch. See you guys next time. Dark Humility. Over and out. Let's get it.